Alrighty, welcome everybody to this podcast for Move Forward with Cameron County. We've got a special guest tonight. Her name is Sara Stapleton-Barrera. She's a candidate for Texas Senate District 27. Sara, welcome to this podcast. And could you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and why you're running, and some of the issues that you feel important for the viewers out there to know.
Yeah, sure. First off, thank you for having me. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Podcasts are probably one of my favorite things to do while campaigning just because they're fun and I enjoy them. So yes, my name is Sara and I am from Brownsville, Texas, and I'm an attorney here, mostly constitutional and indigent work. I've done, I guess, for the past 12 years. I am a mom. I've got 3 kids, and I'm the founder of South Texans for Term Limits. And I ran for this seat back in 2020 against Senator Lucio at the time. And it was sort of this ground shaking sort of a campaign. When I came up, nobody knew who I was. I wasn't a politician. I was just, someone that wanted to make a change and decided to run for office. And it was like a David and Goliath sort of a movement, and we did extremely well. And I'm so proud to say that because of that race, normal people and mothers and women have approached me and said, you know what, we saw what you did, and because of it, I'm running for mayor of my town. And because of it, I'm running for school board. And there's nothing more reaffirming than hearing that here in my hometown. I love it. I couldn't be happier.
Well, that's great. I definitely know that you ran before, and obviously, Mr. Lucio had been in office, I think, for over 30 years or so. So obviously, you stepping into the race the first time around, and obviously running this time, is a big inspiration for those of us who want to see change. Obviously, there's pros and cons to term limits. Obviously, some folks believe that term limits limit the amount of candidates, maybe the quality of candidates, maybe it doesn't give them enough time to do everything they want to do. But at the same time, we've seen where, people are there more than 2 terms, 3 terms, and it becomes, status quo. So I definitely appreciate the entrance of someone like yourself into the race, especially as a female. It was Women's Day, I believe, yesterday. Was it not?
Yes, it was very exciting.
Yeah. Can you give me who in the past you believe were trailblazers with regards to women to actually open up that road for you to actually run?
Yeah, well, here alone in Cameron County, we have some groundbreaking women judges. If you go down to the district courthouse just a mile down this way, we have some women in office now that have paved the way for people like me. And myself as a young lawyer coming into the courtroom for the first time, advocating for clients, being able to see a strong, qualified, brilliant woman on the bench was certainly inspirational and an eye-opener for me. And it really gave me some powerhouses to look up to. And so those are the same people that I reached out to before running and saying, hey, how do you do it? And how do you enter upon this mostly male-dominated sort of an arena and kill it? And they have, really helped me and proved to be great assets.
Yeah. What are some of the reasons that convinced you to go ahead to run for the Senate?
Yeah, there was a point in my life where I was really struggling. I guess 8 years ago now, I found myself as a single mom, struggling on the day-to-day, trying to figure out how to deal with childcare, how to provide healthcare for this kiddo, working a full-time job, And it was hard. I mean, it was definitely an experience that, oops,
There
there.
we go.
It was definitely there we go. It was an experience that really opened my eyes, and luckily I had an education, so I was able to pull myself out of this hole. But look around. Not everybody has the capabilities that I had. Not everybody has an education. Not everybody has a good mom and dad that you can turn to and say, "Hey, what do I do? Give me some advice." So that was a major eye opener for me. I thought, well, geez, I mean, the system is set up to fail people just like me when I was in that situation. And it was just unacceptable. And that was a major, one of my major motivators then, and one of my major motivators now.
Yeah, well, that's one of the thing that I know a lot of women, especially young women, especially in this area, go through. I mean, they hold jobs. They're out in the job market, and unfortunately, they have sometimes they have to choose between a job and who's going to take care of their kids. And they've also got health care issues as well. Some may be able to qualify for public assistance, some may not. But somebody working, at Walmart, they're making, maybe between $7 an hour and maybe 15, but unfortunately they can't qualify for Medicaid, and unfortunately they can't even afford the health insurance that somebody like Walmart provides. What will you advocate if you are elected with regards to some of those bread and butter issues, health care? Uh, what are the some of the things that you have in mind?
Yeah, so we have the highest uninsured rate here in South Texas, out of the entire state. I think our numbers are like 37% of our people are uninsured,
Mm-hmm.
which means you have people having to choose between whether they go pay for their insulin or whether they keep their light bill on, having
Right.
to choose whether they, take themselves and their child to the doctor or just their child. And those should not be decisions that anybody has to make. I'm a firm believer that healthcare is a human right, and the fact that our people, sorry, I keep losing you for some reason. Um, the fact that we literally have people dying. I mean, right now in a global pandemic, if there was any time in our lifetimes to expand healthcare, it's now.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, in the past legislative session, Texas just left millions and millions of federal dollars on the table, and it's really concerning.
Yeah. I actually have some experience self care. I worked for a few years when I was in college in a hospital. I don't like to say what I did, but I was a hospital bill collector. And this was back in the 90s, before the Patient Bill of Rights Act was signed by President Clinton and a Republican Congress, by the way. Prior to 1996, a lot of the hospitals practiced, especially in Houston, patient dumping. And if somebody came into the emergency room, they didn't have health insurance, they had no money. I mean, yes, we provided the care for them to stabilize them, but they went into a county hospital after that. And in Houston, it was Bentob, the old Bentob, not the new one, but the old one that was kind of dilapidated. And of course, the other option was John Sealy and Galveston. But I saw it every day. I saw people come into the hospital every day with no health insurance. They either, and it's always the middle. I mean, you've got those that qualify because they're extremely poor, and then you've got those that don't qualify because they're right there in the middle. Unfortunately, they can't even afford their health insurance through their employer at times, and sometimes they work for a small employer that may not provide health insurance. So I get it. I mean, I really do get as to the necessity. I always wondered during the pandemic, with the high rate of uninsured, I mean, what would happen to those folks when they end up in the hospital? God forbid they'd end up on a ventilator, the clock starts ticking, when as soon as you get into the emergency room. And it shouldn't be that way. People shouldn't have to decide between life and death based on money, you know.
I agree. And what's happening down here is people understand it. And so what the result is they just don't go. They just
Yeah.
don't go to the hospital and they just don't go to the doctor. And then before we know it, it's too late. And it's really, I mean, it's just sad how many people we've lost in the past couple of years because of that.
Yeah. What about our vaccination rates here locally? I don't know what those are, no, but I know there was a hesitance by some section of the political spectrum that we were forcing people to get vaccinated, and they just didn't want to get vaccinated. And I mean, what's your take with regards to expansion of vaccinations, not just for COVID, but for children in general? Because there's people out there that don't want to vaccinate their kids for whatever it is.
Yeah, I think the problem that we face is just a lot of misinformation, right? And a lot of scare tactics. And I think that if we just follow the science, follow the doctor's leads, then we're in the right spot. But when we're still getting our information from Facebook and from, well, my friend said this and he said that, then it just sort of creates this it's just built upon this society of fear, right?
Yeah.
So we just need to make sure that we are following science guidelines and listening to the experts, because we are not all doctors out there, right? We need to
Right.
follow those that know the science.
Yeah. We'll kind of change the subject slightly a little bit, but I want to talk about a little bit about education. Obviously, we've made some strides down here with regards to the consolidation of into UTRGV. I know that Texas A&M has actually started a campus in McAllen. The medical school up in Harlingen. But there's still a need. I actually worked also for South Texas College for about a year, and so I'm pretty familiar with academia as well. But I still think that we need to invest more in education down here, expand our programs. I mean, if the pandemic didn't teach us anything, it taught us that we need more nurses and doctors and pediatricians and cancer specialists and heart specialists. And still to this day, a lot of people have to go up north for some of their basic health care and some of their major, surgeries and stuff like that. So, what you, as a Senate candidate, plan to do to in try to push for further investments in our educational system down here?
Yeah, I mean, myself is just a Brownsville girl. Time and time again, I think we see improvements and we see building, right? But not a lot of it happens here in the lower part of the valley. We hear about, okay, well, they're going to bring this and they're going to bring that. But look, you're right. We all are of the mindset that, I've got 3 kids. I want my kids to go to school and advance and stay in our community and, have jobs in our community. But what we see happening is that students leave after high
Right.
school. They leave, they go elsewhere and find other programs or whatever it may be, and then they don't come back. So yeah, by expanding and growing our college system, our university system, really, I think that it starts before that though, and we've got to pump up on our public grade school education. I think once we start investing in these manners, then we can be the leaders in education. Then the rest of the state can look to us and say, who's doing it right? South Texas is doing it right. And they've allocated their funds correctly and they're building these programs and people are coming to South Texas.
Right.
We can do it. We can be those leaders. We just have to have the right visionaries in there leading us.
Right. Well, one of the things that I know happened to me personally when I was graduating from high school, I'm also from Brownsville. And back in those days, the local community college, as well as the offshoot of Pan Am, didn't have a computer science program. So I was one of those that had to make a choice. If I wanted a computer science to pursue computer science, I would have to go out of town, and I did. And honestly, the only reason I came back was that I actually, back in those days, they actually advertised jobs in the paper, and I found this position and I sent my resume, but it was as a joke. It was one of those weekends. I came down, I looked at the paper, and I saw this position, and I said, engineering manager. Huh, let me send it. Well, the joke was on me. I got hired, and 25 years later, I'm already down here. So, but I understand, the programs weren't available, and that leads to another question. Obviously, in the last couple of years, we've seen SpaceX come down here, and there's criticism with regards to SpaceX as far as their hiring. There's a lot of Californians supposedly moving down to Texas. We have seen a lot of welders being hired, but that's another area where the programs available to support such an operation still don't exist. So it's something that I think you know should be pushed for. You know, yeah,
Yeah, SpaceX is kind of a double-edged sword, right? I mean, we hear time and time again these promises of jobs, and these promises of growth, and these promises of this and that. But oftentimes they don't come into fruition. And you're right, they bring people from out of the county, and then we start hearing about all these environmental problems and
right,
regulations that they're not abiding by, and people out on Boca Chica Beach not having access to their roads. I mean, there's a right way and a wrong way to expand.
yeah,
But when we have these outsiders come in and take advantage of the people in the community, then that's what I have major beef with, right?
yeah,
It's got to be bigger than just money and corporate well-beingness, right?
right,
Our number one focus has got to be the community, has got to be the people, period.
yeah. Now, do you think that there can be a balance between corporate America and everyone else? I mean, especially with us, with SpaceX. I mean, can we come to a balance of some sort? Because I just it always seems that it's either jobs or the environment, nothing in between. Uh,
Yeah,
can
I
there
mean,
be
it
a
definitely,
balance?
yeah, it doesn't have to be that way. I mean, I think that that's sort of another one of those misconceptions that's thrown out there. You have to choose either jobs or environments, but that's not the case, right? I mean, we can do both simultaneously. There are plans out there that exist that do both of those things at a high quality level.
Yeah,
But the problem is, what we have here in Texas is we have these regulations, environmental regulations, that are below the national standard, and then our corporations aren't abiding by them, and they're way below these standards, and they're not being held accountable, and they're not fined. If we hold them to the line and fine them when they don't abide by these regulations, then I think that's the first start, because we can improve upon our environmental issues and generate some income from these corporate entities that aren't following the rules.
right, right. With just switching a little bit, another topic a little bit is about immigration. And I wanted to kind of get a feel from you on your position of what we need to do to curtail immigration, or not not just curtail it, but maybe enforce the existing laws that are in place. I mean, as you're well aware of, over the last 2 years, we've seen a great influx of migrants coming over, and they're not necessarily from Mexico. They're actually from Guatemala, from El Salvador. I mean, they're obviously running away from a lot of oppression. I mean, what can we do here? I mean, obviously, we've seen an influx of folks come in. What can we do at the state level? And maybe this is more of the national level, with regards to how to control that a little better. Can I get your take on that?
Yeah, sure. So it is more of a federal issue, but I mean, I can certainly tell you my sentiments and how I feel about it. Growing up here in Brownsville, I remember as a child um, the sisterhood that we had between Matamoros and Brownsville.
Mm.
Going across to Los Portales and eating the cabrito, and going to the mercado, and those are memories that I cherish forever. And I'm so sad to say that my children aren't experiencing those right now because of
Right.
how much things have changed. But there was a point where the economy was really thriving from this sisterhood. And I would love to see us establish that again. It may not be now, but maybe 10 years down the road or however long it takes, but to nourish that relationship again. And I think some of the fear that people have is, well, if these people come across, and we're going to lose our opportunities, and we're going to lose our jobs, and we're going to lose whatever it may be. But that's I think that's a misconception, right? There is a way to humanely and appropriately have this sort of flow between countries that doesn't result in anybody losing out or anybody being tossed aside. And that's the balance. And I think that, at least that's my vision, that I think eventually we'll be able to get back to where we were back when, I was a kid 20,
Yeah.
30 years ago.
Oh, I remember that. I mean, we used to go to Matamoros all the time, whether it was to eat or, well, I won't talk about my 20s, but, you know, I mean, there was a lot of reasons to go to Matamoros, but that doesn't happen anymore, to be honest with you. It really does. I mean, I haven't been to Matamoros in about 3 or 4 years. You know, I mean, partly because it got dangerous in the beginning, and then of course the pandemic and stuff like that. But I had on a previous podcast, I had Mr. Gascos. I think you're familiar with who he is, and one of the things that he mentioned, because he was Texas Secretary of State at one time, is the belief that we have to continuously nourish that relationship between the United States and Mexico, and especially Texas and Mexico. And so that, there's more cooperation on an international level when it comes to problems such as, immigration and drug trafficking and things like that. So, do you believe that we've got to do a better job in nourishing that relationship with Mexico?
Yeah, I mean, we are in this unique position, us as a border town, we are in this unique position that, 99.9% of the rest of the country is not privy to, right? And so what you get is all these national scare tactics, right? You hear, well, the criminals and the this and that and the murderers, all this stuff that you hear. I was just listening to the country music station the other day, and I heard a commercial by one of the candidates, and it was all that rhetoric.
Right.
But yes, I mean, we're better than that, right? And we can be the mouthpiece for our border communities and show the rest of the country, hey, look, just because we're a border town and on the border does not mean all these terrible things that you hear about. We are an area full of culture, full of brilliant minds, and we need to be treated with that respect.
Right. Right. Yeah. And internally here in the valley, one of the things that I think has happened over the last few years, well, for many years, we were kind of like every city was rowing their own boat. There was a hesitance to do any kind of regional approach to things, whether it was building roads and highways, whether it was trying to attract businesses to come down. I know that when SpaceX was first talking about coming down, there was somewhat of a regional approach among the cities. But what can we do to kind of make the valley try to work together more when it comes to attracting business and opportunity? Obviously there's those that push the regional approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think what has happened is that people get afraid, right? I mean, us as Brownsville see all the business and all the, opportunity going to some northern town in our district, then we become disheartened. And then so when an opportunity comes, people don't work together because there's this fear of, oh, well, they're going to get it, and we need it here, and whatever it may be. And so I think that in order for us to actually grow as a unit, we've got to have a collaborative approach,
Right.
and we've got to be able to work as if San Benito is lacking and Brownsville has an extra bone, throw them a bone. I mean,
Yeah.
we are. That's the kind of people that we are here in South Texas, and we just need to get back to that.
Mm-hmm. With regards to taxes and regulations, I know that on the Republican side, at least on the gubernatorial side, there was a few individuals who were running around talking about reducing or eliminating property taxes. Is that really something that is real? I mean, could we ever get to a point where we could reduce property taxes in the state?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that we've got to always think outside the box, and we've always sort of been in this mindset of, oh, well, that's never going to happen because it's never happened before. But that's why nothing changes, right? We've got to be able to elect leaders that believe in the impossible, believe in stepping outside the box, and are innovative and creative enough to come with ideas that offset these bad policies or whatever it may be that we've had for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Look, Texas is a rich, rich, rich state. We got plenty of money, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is no shortage here in Texas. So when we talk about the property taxes being allocated to the schools for education, and that's why they're so high or whatever it may be, it doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
We just need to reimagine how the system works and convince others that our way will work, and we'll get there.
Well, one of the confusions out there, I've heard it for years when it comes to property taxes, is that there was some belief that when the lottery was introduced back in the 1990s, that somehow we would never have any tax increases. In fact, if I recall back in those days when the lottery was passed, it was passed to prevent an income tax from being implemented, or I believe that was one of the things, and that the majority of the funds would be going to schools. But I don't know if that's the case. Does the lottery proceeds go to the schools completely?
Some of it.
Okay.
It's not completely. Some of it is allocated towards the schooling, but clearly not enough. I mean, if you look at the numbers, Texas compared to the rest of the nation, we spend $4,000 less on each child's education per year. I mean, that's how behind we are.
Yeah.
When we're one of the richest and finest states here in the country, the fact that we're skimping each kid out of $4,000 a year is unacceptable.
Yeah. Now, one thing I want to go back to education about, I want to touch on the issue between public schools and charter schools. And I can't remember when charter schools popped up, but there appears to be competition, I'd actually call it poaching, of students from public schools into charter schools. And I'm just trying to get your take on whether you see that continuing, because obviously it's my understanding that schools get paid by the number of students that are attending. And so if this continued poaching continues, our public schools are headed on a pathway to, almost being dilapidated because all the kids are going to the charter schools. And in fact, those charter schools pick and choose who they want. It's not necessarily everybody. So what can we do to stop the poaching or equalize the fair treatment between the charter schools and the public schools?
Yeah, so I am anti-voucher, right? The problem with the charter schools is that our public school funding, our tax dollars that should go to a school that can represent anybody, are being allocated to these charter schools that are not inclusive. I mean, you're right. They pick and choose. How they pick and choose, Lord knows. But what it does is it results in this exclusive sort of a program.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't be allocating public school funding to an exclusive program that rejects certain children. It's not the way that it needs to work. So yes, we've got to put ourselves in a position where we stop the expansion of charter schools. The issue with them as well is that they're not they're not regulated like the public school system is. There's no transparency. There's no elect.
You there? Hello? If you're on, you can relog into the Zoom. There we go.
Oh, sorry. I don't know what is going on with my stuff today. We are.
Yeah, so we were on the topic of charter schools.
Yeah, yes. So we've got to, there's no transparency. They are, there's not an elected board, right? So
Right.
you've got these CEOs that are making bukus of money. And we all saw the story where they were flying private jets to wherever.
Right.
And that's on our tax dollar. Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, and I know that one CEO was actually wanted by Turkey for trying to start a coup a few years ago. And for some reason, he's still in the U.S., but yeah, I've just seen that. Personally, I've seen that, with the poaching of students from the private schools. And just feeding on that, I mean, it's always been known that teacher pay has been something less than, what everybody else gets paid. What do you think you can do to try to increase teacher pay? I mean, after all, they're educating our students for more than 8 hours a day, sometimes 10, 12 hours a day. But it just seems it just isn't enough. These stipends that given out every once in a while, I mean, just don't cut it. Teachers really need some real help out there.
Yeah, I agree. Once in a lifetime, I was a teacher many years ago, and it was the hardest job of my life. You're overworked, you're underpaid, you don't have the resources. I mean, it is, that's why, to be quite frank, that's why I went to law school, because I was like, gosh, I can't do this because it's just not sustainable. And so I've been yelling and screaming at everybody that I can, and, had a call to action to Governor Abbott back in 2020 and said, hey, we need to raise starting teacher pay to $60,000 now, and more experienced teachers, paid at a higher level. And we've got to limit their hours. They can't be working, till 8 o'clock at night with all the after school activities and on the weekends, and putting their own dollars into resources because there's not funding, especially now, right in the middle of the pandemic, because they're not just teachers. They're having to be counselors, they're having to be nurses, they're having to wear all these hats that they didn't sign up for.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I've heard that, here in Brownsville, with regards to their health insurance, it's astronomical what they pay on a monthly basis. I mean, I've worked for companies where I paid $200 a month for a family plan, and yet I hear, teachers and administrators talk about paying up to $600-700 a month. So some of them have to choose, between paying $700 a month out of your paycheck, and that's in addition to the low pay. It's just not fair.
Yeah, and then they work, 40 years as an educator, and then they retire, and then the retirement is insufficient, and then has not been a cost of living adjustment in the past 20 years. I mean,
Right.
it is a heartstring puller, because I mean, these are the people that educate our youth.
Right.
So if they're in the position where they're teaching a classroom full of kids, but they can't focus, or their mind is elsewhere because they're worried about how they're going to pay their insurance, then we're doing everybody in the entire system a disservice.
Yeah. Yeah. And one last topic I want to talk about. This is about what happened last year with regards to our electrical grid. Obviously, we had a freeze last year, and I had no electricity for up to 4 days. It was horrible. What do we do at the state level to improve the situation so that it doesn't happen again? Oh, and by the way, just to let you know, next week's I actually have another podcast show. It's Brownsville Tech Live, and we're going to be talking about solar energy and the grid and stuff like that. But one of the things that I've done some research, is the fact that our grid is actually separate from the other two grids in the country. So it almost seems that even in an emergency, they couldn't provide us electricity if they had it. We're kind of on an island to ourselves. So, what do you think we need to do to improve the situation with the grid so that it doesn't happen again, so that we don't have people freezing, people actually dying? It's just not, in my opinion, excusable. Uh, I think there has to be a reshuffling of ERCOT completely. But what do you think we need to do to prevent that from happening again? Because eventually it will. It'll happen again.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm right on there with you. I think we were out for 5 days, and I've got three little kids, so panic sets in. Luckily, my parents only lost it for a couple of hours, so we were able to camp out in the living room. But yeah, so the way that we're situated is that there's two grids up in the rest of the nation that are split, and then Texas is the sole state with its own grid. And you're absolutely right. What that means is if we have a problem, we're out of luck. If a state up here has a problem, they're on the same grid as our buddies. So everyone's going to be fine. So we have put ourselves in this situation to where we're a lone island. And if our grid is down, we know exactly what happens because we've already encountered it. We know that Biden is giving, millions and millions of dollars worth of infrastructure. So we actually use it for infrastructure, and we ensure that we have the right engineers working on the grid. We ensure that weatherization is happening. We ensure that we have new quality transmitters. I mean, if we're going to be risky enough to not connect to the rest of the nation, then we got to be smart about it and ensure that we've got top of the line quality equipment. Otherwise, we'll be in the same spot we were.
Yeah, do you think that we need to invest? I mean, I have a chart that I'm going to be introducing next week on that podcast, but it's astonishing. The country as a whole uses, I think, 9 million megawatt hours or something like that. I don't know what the technical term is, but the chart breaks it down into where the country gets its energy. And the majority of it, a good bulk of it, is gas-fired plants like the ones that we have here in Texas. And then another chunk is coal-fired plants. And then third is wind, and we have a lot of wind farms in the area. And then, of course, fourth, actually, no, I'm sorry. Third is nuclear. Fourth is wind farms. And fifth is solar, obviously. And there's some other ones. But for the majority, those are the four or five. What's your position with regards to building additional infrastructure? I mean, I know that, gas fired plants are one thing. There's a hesitance to invest in any coal plants because of the pollution. And obviously, nuclear is green energy, but there's concerns, obviously, over accidents such as Chernobyl, the plant in Japan, and of course, 3 Mile Island back in the 70s. But, and of course, there's wind. I mean, what do you think the solution is as far as to propping up our grid with those technologies? I mean, there's talk about renewables, but I think we're still way off when it comes to renewables. But what can we do in the immediate?
Yeah, so I am a huge supporter of wind and solar. I do have the support of all of our environmental groups, the Sierra Club, Climate Cabinet, American Youth for Climate Action, and you have we have brilliant scientific minds, right, that are able to explain why some of the systems that we've been using for the past decades um, are hazardous to our future, and are creating systems to where we have a higher number of asthmatics here in town. We've got people with breathing issues. We've got dirty water that's not safe for drinking. I mean, we've got to ensure that we are able to be sustainable. We've got to ensure that we have a generation for our children and for our grandchildren and for the generations to come. But if we're relying solely on oil and gas, then we're putting ourselves in a hazardous situation that we may not even have that type of future for generations to come.
Right.
So we've got to be smart about how we plan for our future. And if we have scientists telling us that this is the way to do it, and will create energy for our environment, and then we need to really consider it.
Right. I'm going to flip screens real quick because it looks like there's a lag here. Give me a second. You back?
I'm here.
Yeah, looks like you're frozen, but we'll keep on talking.
Okay.
All right. So one last area that I want to talk about, I guess that the previous one was my last one, but I do want to talk about this next area because it's a current event with regards to gas prices. A lot of people here in Texas don't understand why our gas prices are so high, especially since we've got refining capacity. Do you think we'll get up to $7 a gallon? I mean, that's going to be pretty painful for a lot of folks. I've seen places in California, but I don't know if that's going to be the case. Here in Texas, with regards to gas.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that's all of our fear, right? We can't afford $7 a tank for gas. Everybody will end up walking, right? And we're not in a position where we can do that. So look, there are answers, and it's again just a matter of people being innovative. There's this whole hole that we haven't really explored yet, regarding some taxation, right? So this whole EV, electrical vehicle system, our electric vehicles and the stations that power them, those entities are not taxed.
Yeah.
So if there was an implementation of an EV tax, we could immediately make millions and millions of dollars off of that taxation. But instead, what's happening is just our gas pumps are taxed, and so there's this huge offset that can be accounted for if we just allocate the funding and where we need it, and the taxation where we need it. But yeah, it's a mess. I mean, you're right. I think people are starting to panic, and it's just kind of waiting.
Yeah. You there? I think I lost you again. Just connect back on. There you are. Either that or somebody's streaming a lot of internet right now. And just as a follow-up to that, with regards to rail, I mean, I know that there's some projects going on where we're looking at introducing high-speed rail, primarily in the Triangle area, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, Houston, and back. There's no mention of any connection to the Valley, which I think is a shame, right? Because if it's one of the things that we learned from the pandemic and some of the bad weather that we've had, is that either we travel by car from the Valley, or we depend on our airports. And as you know, with airlines consolidating and merging, and now this trend with airlines where, because all of our three airports are actually regional airports, they're making decisions on whether to service cities based on capacity. So getting a flight out of the Valley recently has become harder You either go early in the morning, late at night, and right at lunchtime. And it seems that the airlines are having a tough time, not only because of the pilot shortage, but aircraft and so forth to service some of the cities like we have here, the three cities in the valley. Um, will you push for us to be included in that high speed rail eventually?
Yeah, I mean, anything that cuts down on emissions, I think is useful. And we are in a position where we have, a higher rate of poverty here in South Texas, and people have a harder time of getting around, and not everybody has a car or access to transportation.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that if done well, I mean, that's always seems to be like the catch, right? If done well and done in a manner that doesn't disrupt, doesn't run a line through, a bunch of people's homes or whatever it may be, then we're onto something. What I don't want to see though is them coming in and taking advantage of a vulnerable population down here based on income.
Mm-hmm.
So if done well, yes, I think that we can become, we are in a position where we are on the border. We do have a port, and we're on the water, so
Right.
we are in this very unique position to where we can really be a leader on transportation issues, but
Mm-hmm.
it has to be done in a manner that helps and not harms our population.
Okay. And one last question. I do ask this of some of my other podcasters. You can choose to answer if you want, but I'd like to a little bit more about how faith has actually affected your life and how your faith actually moves you forward. I mean, especially during the last 2 years when there was a lot of doubt whether some of us were going to be here or not. I think all of us had thoughts in our minds. Am I going to catch COVID? Am I going to end up in a hospital in a ventilator? I mean, how has your faith helped you over the last 2 years to get through this? And what does that mean for us as you pursue a seat in the Texas Senate?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've got to keep faith, we've got to keep hope. And, for me personally, I put myself in a position to where I know that all of this is bigger than me, bigger than you, bigger than just the community, right? This
Right.
is what we're trying to accomplish here and do for our community, takes a leap of faith
Right.
and takes the belief in knowing um, that there is something greater to guide us upon this journey. And yeah, I think because I've, tried my best to live my life in a manner that is ethical and straightforward and, treating others the way I want to be treated, then I feel that I put myself in a position where I can be an excellent leader because I will represent everybody. No bias on who you are, where you come from, what your personal belief is. And couldn't be prouder to be in that position.
Well, we definitely appreciate you coming on board. I will let you know that you're actually my first Democrat. You're running as a Democrat, right?
I am.
Yeah, so you're actually the first Democrat that actually accepted my invitation. I had a few Republicans already, and I've been telling friends, I said, I'm really upset. I can't get Democrats to respond. I've got all these Republicans just dying to get on this show. But I want to thank you personally for being the first Democrat to appear on the show. I know that you've got an opponent for a runoff. When is the runoff?
Runoff is May 24th.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, we'll definitely post that on our webpage, reminding everybody that there is a runoff on May 24th. Once again, we appreciate for your time, and it's been very informative. It's not always that we get to, I don't want to use the word corner, our candidates or elected officials, but one thing you've left me an impression is that you are accessible And that's not always the case, with a lot of people that have run, or even a lot of people that sit in office today. And I hope that this won't be the last time that you come on the show. We plan to be on all the way till November, so we'll probably have you back, after the runoff and so forth. So
I would love to be back. And yeah, I do pride myself on being accessible, transparent. I encourage people to ask me the hard questions. And I think that we need to do that to all of our elected officials.
right,
Ask them the hard questions, put them on the spot, and see what you get.
yeah. And you want to leave any last words for the voters before we close?
Yeah, I mean, I would like people to reach me. You know, what I do is I give everybody my cell phone number because I feel like the more people that I talk to, the better I get, the smarter I get, the more informed I get. So call me. Honestly, I think that's why my phone kept on blacking out. Is because I'm using my phone and calls were coming through. So that was my mistake. But call me. My cell is 956-372-8756. Ask me the hard questions. And, I don't have the ego to where if I don't know the answer, I will say, I don't know. Let's figure it out together. And I think that's what it's about.
Yeah. Well, I want to apologize because I think I've been pestering you even at midnight with messages and stuff like that. So I hope you didn't mind.
I don't mind. Keep them
Alrighty.
coming.
Okay. Well, once again, everybody, it was great to have Sara Stapleton-Barrera on with us on the show. She is running for District 27. There is a May runoff, so the voting's not over. Let's get out to the polls, and we hope to see Sara soon. Thank you,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Sara, stay on for a little bit.